Today's guest on Magic for Life is Josh Koerpel. With a BA in Spanish and a master's degree in mechanical engineering, Josh is the co-founder and CEO of firebuilders.io. Previously a ship captain and an Alaskan wilderness guide, Josh worked for years as a special projects mechanical designer for clients like Disney, Cirque du Soleil, and Metallica. Later, he began building his own software solutions and transitioning to B2B SaaS products. I'm excited for you to meet him and hear his story. Let's cue the intro and we'll jump right in. I've spent the last 20 years studying, teaching, and coaching people to find their greatness and take their lives to the next level. Along the way, it's become evident that emotions are at the root of everybody's successes and failures. Worry and fear are the enemies, and it's time to forge the armor and earn the tools to overcome the two things that could single-handedly destroy your future. Hi, my name is Michael Johnson, and I'm a life coach, a peak performance trainer, and I'm the emotions guy. It's time to take back control of how you feel, control of how you act, and control of how you experience life. It's time to become a lifer, a new breed of overachiever focused on living every minute to its fullest. We are responsible for how we feel, and no one and no thing can make us feel anything. Emotional mastery is our journey, and emotional education and intelligence is the key. We are lifers, and this is Magic for Life. What's up, lifers? Michael Johnson here with the Magic for Life podcast, and I'm excited to join me today because we have the infamous, the famous, the ever so elusive Josh Koerpel. Thanks for joining me today, and it's exciting to have you here finally.
Yes, Michael, thanks for having me on the show, man. It has been it's been a pleasure thus far, and I have high hopes for this talk.
Me too. I am excited because holy cow, watching and just observing from the outside, your journey through life is unlike anybody else's. It's you're incredible, and every time, I mean, we've only had the opportunity to chat a couple times, and I just am blown away. And looking at the trail you've left online is incredible. Like you just the things you've been doing. So we're gonna jump in and we're gonna talk about all that stuff. So let's start with the most challenging question on the planet. Where did it all begin? What's the backstory behind you?
Where did it all begin? Well, good question. When I was like maybe 16 years old, I was in a Rotary International exchange student. So in like what would have been my senior year of high school, instead, I was shipped down to Chile and lived with a host family for a year. Didn't speak any Spanish. They didn't speak any English. And if anybody is familiar with Rotary International, it's not like a coddle me, oh, come here, we'll help you through, no problem kind of program. They just kind of drop you into the mix and they're like, adios, see you in a year. So that kicked off for me, at the time there were challenges. I mean, I loved it. And then there were times where I absolutely hated it. But I made it through. I learned Spanish. I got really close with my host family. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the world. And I came back a completely changed person. And that kicked off a whole mission, I guess you could call it, for me to go experience the world, have the confidence to talk to people, to try new things, to learn new things. I mean, that was pretty much the crystallization seed was that trip.
Holy cow. And so did you ultimately learn the language and you're able to speak it?
Yeah, and it was not easy because Chilean Spanish, I love Chilean people. I love the country, I love the food, I love the culture, I love everything about it. But their dialect of Spanish is a little bit tough to really learn. In fact, they write books, entire books dedicated to translating Chilean Spanish.
Oh my gosh.
So it's honestly, man, it is the equivalent of having, say, a German exchange student who came to the United States, really wanted to learn English, and they dropped him in the deep South Bayou, Louisiana, and that's where he learned how to speak. That's kind of the Spanish that I can speak now.
Wow, that's amazing. And I can't imagine being dropped in, and you were how old, 15?
16, yeah, 16. Yep.
And did you choose to do this, or were your parents like, get out? Like,
no. No, it might have been a little bit of both.
Oh,
I might
okay.
have been a slightly problematic child. And but I have to say, like they asked me, I was all for it. I mean, I grew up, my dad was in sales internationally, so he was always traveling around different parts of the world. I mean, I kind of grew up knowing that that existed, but I never did it really myself. This was my opportunity, and I kind of jumped at it.
Wow, that's really cool, and what a cool beginning. And so then after this, you graduated from high school. You did this craziness. Then what?
Yeah. What graduated, I went to college. I ended up getting a Spanish degree, an undergraduate in Spanish.
A different kind of
Then
Spanish.
a different kind of Spanish. I lived over in Valencia, and I did a bunch of studying over there as well. And that, that was way different, man. They put you into classrooms where everyone speaks English, even the teachers. I don't even know why they call it study abroad. Like you're so insulated from the rest of the culture. And so it was a totally different experience, but I had a real good handle on Spanish. And after college, I went and joined a tall ship and lived for the next like 8 years on board ships, like all over the world, sailing and working my way up all the way to captain's license. I got my captain's license, and then I was the captain of these big pirate ship looking things for a while.
You
So
said tall ship.
yeah.
That's what they're referred to as, tall ship.
Yes. They're like they look like pirate ships. They're traditionally rigged sailing vessels, and they're all over the world.
Wow. And why did you end up at that? I mean, like from getting a degree in Spanish, did you just see them and thought, gosh, I think I'll go do that.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much everybody went to get a job out of school,
Right.
and this one particular ship, it was called the Brig Niagara, out of Erie, Pennsylvania, and at the time, it took volunteers. They were like, look, give us 3 weeks minimum, right? And we will teach you everything that you need to know about sailing these square rigged vessels. You'll sleep in a hammock. You get one single sea bag, right? So whatever you can fit into that bag, that's what you've got for the entire 3 weeks. And at the end of 3 weeks, I was like, I am in love with this. The concept, the work was so fulfilling. The people were awesome. I was learning so much. I was traveling. We sailed all over the Great Lakes. I was like, can I swear on this show?
Well, we keep it for kids, so.
Okay. No, so yeah, okay. Good. I'm glad I asked. Yeah, so I was like, man, I want to continue to do this. And so I stayed for like 2.5, maybe 3 months after that, and helped them down rig the ship. We took all the sails and all the yards and everything down for the winter. And at the time, there was another ship out of Milwaukee, which is in the Great Lakes as well, like a Great Lake. And I took a bus to Milwaukee, joined up with this ship, and then we sailed out of the Great Lakes, out the St. Lawrence Seaway, into Halifax. We picked up a group of guys. We taught them how to celestially navigate as we sailed from Halifax to Bermuda, Bahamas. And that, once I got out into the ocean and I started sailing, I was just hooked. So that kicked the entire thing off, man.
Holy cow. So you have an adventurer's heart through and through.
I think so. I think everybody's got it. I just was dumb enough sometimes to act on it, more. Because there were some times I can tell you that it was incredibly dangerous in retrospect. Half the time I'm amazed that I survived that, because we did some things out at sea that were totally not OSHA approved, and stuff that it wasn't reckless, but
Right.
at the same time it was necessary for us to fix something, or I had to, I don't know, all kinds of stuff that we end up doing out there. So
Wow.
It was crazy.
Wow. So what was the worst storm you were ever in?
The worst storm that we were ever in, we were in a pretty nasty one going across the Atlantic. We sailed this 150-foot two-masted schooner called the Pride of Baltimore across from Baltimore, Maryland, over to England. That was our first port of call. And in the middle of the Atlantic, we hit a pretty nasty storm. It was a good, like, sustained 70 knots, which is like, I don't know. It's a little bit different in miles per hour, but it's just a lot of wind. And it was the rough seas and everything. We're talking like 25-foot seas.
Wow.
And we were just, luckily, it was kind of pushing us in the direction of England. But that was a pretty rough one. And then on that same boat, months later, we got into an accident where we were 80 miles off the coast of France in the Bay of Biscay, and a piece of the boat broke. A really important piece of the boat broke in the front of the boat, in the bow of the boat. And that led to a complete chain reaction that totally dismasted. It took the mast, both masts cracked at deck level and broke and fell on top of the boat. And again, this is like, they're like 150-foot masts.
Right.
And we then, no one was hurt, but we ended up getting ourselves into France, and we lived there for months as we rebuilt the boat and did the whole thing. So it's like, it just led to a bunch of like crazy adventures.
And you just like found a place to stay, lived in France for.
Yeah, we actually stayed on the boat. So we would live on the boat, and the boat, we had to take everything off. So it was just the hull at that point. And
Right.
we were living there. We were in this little town called Saint Nazaire, and it was in a lock system. So we were like, we were safe. And yeah, we had all kinds of, we learned how to speak French, made friends with the locals, all that stuff. It was great.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I mean, this is an interesting start. It sounds like an epic movie that we're going to have to write at some point. I'm sure we can find somebody to pull this story together.
One day.
So, Alaskan Wilderness Guide. This seems like a far cry from ship captain.
It actually, the reason that I got that job was because of the captain's license. It just, not a lot of people had that level of license and the experience. And so we would take people up. We actually left out of a little place called Port Orchard over in Washington. And we took this boat up the Inside Passage all the way to Southeast Alaska. And then from there, we would run these trips from Sitka to Juneau and back, where we would teach people fly fishing, and we would hike. We would take them kayaking, like around icebergs. We would take them to Tidewater glaciers, which, if you've never seen, I mean, I'm sure you've seen a picture of it. It's where the glacier just gets itself right into the water, and there's like a 300-foot cliff, and you just sit there with a boat with a hot chocolate, and you watch these gigantic icebergs the sizes of apartment buildings just break off of the face of this glacier and fall into the water. It's crazy. And so we did that. I did that for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months, something like that. And then we made our way back down to Seattle, and it was a great, I loved it.
Wow. What was the hardest thing you ever had to do as a captain of any of the ships that you were a captain of?
There's the 5% of the time where you have to make like really, really important split-second decisions. That's really what you get paid for. So I was the captain down here, and like my first week, it was my first command. And the first week we had an entire full boat, 49 people. They're all drinking. It's an 80-foot schooner, and the weather's like picking up, and it's getting dark. And so we start to set the sail, or we start to strike the sails and get ready to come back in. Well, I go and turn the engine on to kick us up, to fire it up. Nothing, it just doesn't start. And so now it's really dark, and we have to put the sails back up because the tide is taking us away from Key West and pushing us to like Cuba. And so I have to sail back and forth with all of these people who are now really late. We were supposed to be in the dock, and I'm trying to get them in. They're all complaining. We lost all power on the boat, so there were no bathrooms or anything. So people were freaking out, right? One person was crying in the, like, up at the bow kind of thing. It was like, and all of this pressure is on me to get them back. And so we ended up doing it, but like my first week, like that was a trial by fire kind of thing.
Wow.
But we did it. We handled it.
And in the dark, no less.
Yeah, and in the dark and in a shipping channel, because there's like, if anybody's ever been to Key West, there's one big channel that comes into the island where all the cruise ships used to go through. And we were sailing in that shipping channel. There was no way around it. And so we were dodging all of these cruise ships that were leaving the island as well. It was like, oh man, it was just so precarious of a situation for I was 26,
Wow.
So.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. So now all of a sudden you go back to school for a master's degree in mechanical engineering.
Yep.
Okay. From Spanish to adventurer to captain to, hey, I think I'll get a mechanical engineering degree.
Yeah, I've always been that. I've always been that kind of guy. Like engineering has always interested me. I didn't have the math classes to do this. Like just like if somebody wanted to become a doctor, they needed to take pre-med.
Right.
So for me, I was in India at the time when I found this particular program at Boston University, and so I actually came back early, and what the whole program was called LEAP. They take people with non-engineering degrees, and they say, look, we created this program. We are going to give you all of the classes, everything. We are going to like shove a fire hose down your throat. And for the next 2 years, you're going to take every single class that someone with a 4-year degree would have taken. And if you don't stay above, I think it was like a 3.5, like if you survive this, then we will allow you to apply to the master's program just like anybody else. And the competition to get into this program was really high. 2, just to apply, you had to have taken a Calculus 1 course, which I hadn't at all. I hadn't even taken trig. I had to teach myself trig to pass a test to get into the calculus course, pass that with an A just to apply to this program, plus do the GREs, which is essentially like the SAT equivalent for a graduate course, just to get in, like just to send them the application so they would read it. And but as it turns out, I did really well on all of that stuff. I aced it from an academic point of view, but what really I think got me in was I played blues harmonica, and I actually went to BU to talk to them and to get to know the campus and stuff. And it just so happened that night, one of the teachers that sat on the advisory panel was there playing music, and he was learning how to play blues harmonica. And I was like, oh man, dude, I could show you a couple riffs. And so we ended up sitting down and doing that all night. And I think that's really how I got in. I'm pretty sure it was the harmonica that got me in, but that's what I had to do to get into that program.
Okay. So there's a piece you've left out here. I'm going to get it out of you. Why? Okay. So you're traveling the world, you're doing things that most people go, oh, that's fake. That's stuff you make up in stories in the movies. Right. You say you're in India and you're like, I'm going to apply for this program, which I'm not qualified for, and I don't have the knowledge. So I think I'll just learn it and I'll get in. It sounds a little catch me if you can kind of vibe, but there had to have been a great why as to why you would go and put yourself through this. And
see if I could do it.
That was it.
That's pretty much, I was interested in it. I knew that I could do it. I knew that I wanted, the engineering thing was always a passion for me. I just never really pursued it. That's what I wanted to do. I was like hell bent on making that happen. And I did whatever I needed to do to make it happen. And I'm so glad that I did, because even now, because I did the engineering thing. I got my degree. I got a great job in the entertainment related field. So we were designing a whole bunch of stuff for various very cool bands and Cirque du Soleil and all of that stuff. I did that for a number of years. And everything that, even though I'm not doing that now, everything that I learned in that engineering program has served me tenfold. when I'm now doing my own stuff. So I guess it's just all in a quest of learning and pushing yourself and growing and stretching kind of thing.
Okay, well, two things then. It wasn't a girl.
No, what, to impress a girl?
Or something, I don't know, but usually guys do crazy things for a girl, you know, like.
I was with a girl at the time. In fact, we traveled to India together, and we went to Boston together for the first part of my schooling. We were together, and she definitely played a part in it. Like, she was super supportive, super motivating, right? She was just as driven as I was, but from, you know, in another area. And that had a lot to do with it. But yeah, it was really just like, can I do this? And I know I'll be good at it. So if I'm going to do it 150%.
Okay. So then the other thing then, so we got the girl side of it, but where do you think you got this crazy, like, okay, I'm going to do that and go. Okay, I'm going to do that now, go. Okay, I'm going to do this now, go. Like, you know, I would love to say that for as natural and calm as you're talking about it, that it's a normal thing. But I talk to a lot of people and I work with a lot of people, and this is not the normal thing. So where
Okay.
do you think you got this from?
I think like that Chilean experience started it off, right? You start to see, for me anyway, you start to see what's really possible. Like, the world is what you make of it. And like, I felt at the time, it's an interesting mix between ignorance is bliss. Like, I didn't know what I was getting myself into at the time, right? So you kind of take it, you commit, and you take whatever comes and whatever slaps you in the face. But at the same time, also, I feel like I can design my own life. I guess I was afraid of unrealized potential within myself. And that's what drove me in these insane ways to do this stuff. And I don't know, what do you think? Like, do you think everybody's born that way and it just gets squashed down over time? Or do you think that I really am, there's something like messed up with me? I'm curious.
Well, I don't know about messed up, but I do believe that that the human potential is probably there for all of us. And along the way, the veil of what's supposed to be maybe gets pulled over people's eyes, and then they spend a lifetime trying to lift that veil, or they spend a lifetime being sheep. And I see that a lot. I mean, one of my favorite one of my favorite people to work with is the entrepreneurial people of the world, because of the fact that there's a certain element of them lifting that veil of what's supposed to be and moving towards what could be, and what we can make come to life, and what we can make become real. And that's why it's so fascinating when I get to talk with people like you, because you're doing it, you're living it, you're not just talking about it, you go and do it.
Yeah, thanks. And vice versa, right? Like, it's talking to people like you that do things that inspire me. Like, my buddy, my best friend from 6th grade, this guy named Matt Wetchler, he and I are always like one-upping one another, right? And that has helped in my life.
Sure.
Really, like, push it to the limit, because I so respected him, he respected me, it was mutual, and we just went for it. We always were like that. And it really helped to have that style, that like figure, that idea to emulate, that you can see it in someone else. So I was very fortunate to have that. And I don't know, plus life just gets a little crazy. I mean, there's so much to do out there. It'd be a shame to just let it pass you by. You know that when I drove that schooner, that 80-foot schooner down here in Key West for almost a year. And we did 3 sales a day. The sunset sale was the most popular. So we would go out, I'd take, up to 49 people, we'd go watch the sunset. Everybody would be drinking and everything. Well, the first couple of minutes, once we set the sails and we turn the engines off, we pass out drinks. Everybody starts to get a little boozed up. And then what most likely will happen is that someone from the group will come back to the wheel where I am and start talking to me about like, hey man, how in the world did you get, I was 27. How in the world did you get this job? Like, I wish I was doing this when I was your age, but I can't. Now I'm 50 and I've got a house and a mortgage and a family and I've got debt and all of this. And I wish I would have done this. And I got that seriously, man, every night, every single night for an entire year. And you start to see a pattern, like it's impossible not to, is that life could be full of regrets. It can be full of regrets. And you would say to these guys and women, like you'd say, look, you're only 50. Like there's still time. You could get a boat right now. You could sell some of your stuff. You could go minimal. Your family's almost in college. Like your sons and daughters are almost gone out of the house. So, this is possible for you. And that didn't make a difference because they had already made up their mind that they couldn't do it. It was too late. It's too late to change. I never wanted to be like that. So I just tried not to.
It's amazing that learned helplessness that sort of kicks in for, I think for everybody at different points in their world, even people that are pushing the limits. There's this certain element of, well, I can't do that because I don't have enough time or I don't have enough knowledge or whatever. And it's, I think, important to be able to find the people that push you. And like you were saying, you had to have an old friend that continues to help you one up because it keeps your perspective fresh and new. Did you have any times along this path where things just weren't working out and you maybe thought, gosh, maybe I should go back to the norm?
So many. It would be a whole lot easier to do that. That's for sure. Especially recently, building the software up. I mean, there are days where you've just put in 16, 17 hours of work and you've done that consistently over the last 8 months, 10 months, and you're just not seeing anything. You're not seeing any growth. You're not seeing any true progress. And man, you say to yourself, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And should I, half the time I'm just like, man, just quit, get a job, like make it easy on yourself. Why do you always have to make it so hard on yourself, Josh? Like, what is your problem? But I tell you, I'm glad that I don't give up in retrospect. There are a lot of times where you do feel that way, but I'll tell you, things have a way of working out if you just stick with them. And it only sounds like faith in whatever sense of the word that you want to say that, but it really only sounds like faith until you see that actually happen with your own two eyes. And as soon as you do, you then know that if I stick with this, it is inevitable that this will succeed in some way, shape, or form. It might not necessarily be the way that I envision it right now, but it will be a success if I stick with it. And that's what pulled me through the mud a lot of the times.
Awesome. When you think about maybe we just take the last few years, maybe 3 or 4 years, what do you think has been your main focus? And let me explain what I'm actually looking for, because I'm kind of not going for the surface level question, but I believe that what you focus on, you get. And I believe that when you focus on certain elements in your world, they grow, and it could be negative or positive. So what do you think in the last 3 years has been the thing that you have focused on to make grow in your world?
It's a good question. I would say the question that has like now gotten into my mind is not necessarily can I do something, but should I do it? That has dictated the last couple of years for me. I have already proven to myself so much about what I'm capable of. I recognize that, I mean, man, I just turned 40. So like half of my life is probably over. So I spend the first half like figuring out whether I can do something. And now this half thinking about should I? And that question has led me to a lot of deeper meanings as far as like what is important, whether what's fulfilling for me, whether or not I should spend my time here versus there, the software in itself. Like, I have focused on creating something that is really the most fulfilling thing that I can possibly fathom and that I can actually create for the world. That to me has been my focus. And yeah, like it's less about right now, it's less about how long is this going to take me, right? 8, 10 months, 12 months. I mean, the software has been around for like almost 3 years now. How long is it going to take me? It's less about that question. And now for me, it's a little bit more of how far can I take this concept? And I don't put a timeline on it. And it's helped quite a bit in shifting my perspective on a day-to-day level.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I love that, the idea of that shift of perspective. What do you feel like in terms of communication? I think generally as a race, put a lot of focus lately on how we communicate to other people and outside of ourselves. And I've noticed there's maybe a bit of a lack of how we communicate to ourselves. I mean, there wasn't too many decades ago when if you said you talked to yourself, people would say you were crazy. And, that's, I think, slowly going away now. And it's become not the understanding of the masses. So that's great. But in that light, what do you feel like is the typical communication between you and yourself in terms of language or things you say to yourself that keep you moving in a positive direction?
I am definitely guilty of negative self-talk, just like everybody else. It's just that I've tried to become a little bit more aware of it when it happens, and that has helped reduce the frequency. I also, when I'm talking to myself about things like this, I spend less time. I don't know if this is the first time I've ever really articulated this, but it's like I spend less time trying to put words to things. And at the very beginning, I try to focus more on how it makes me feel, right? I play these scenarios out in my mind about the feeling and the emotions that come up with that. And that generally sets the compass for me. And then I can start to get a little bit of clarity. Then it can start kind of taking a direction, and that motion starts to uncover things. It starts to uncover a little bit more clarity about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. So that internal dialogue tends to be pretty positive. Like if I'm thinking about a project, like something new, and I'm going through it in my mind and I'm trying to see how it would make me feel, and I get like really negative emotions because of it, like saying to myself, man, that just feels scammy, or that just doesn't feel right. I honestly, I just rely on that. I don't pursue it, and I move into something else that does feel a little bit better. So yeah, it's an interesting question about the negative, like the self-talk, like looking inward. For me, what precedes the talk is a general awareness of how it makes me feel, and then I kind of go off of that.
I love that. And I think that as maybe normal as that seems to you, I don't find that enough people are spending enough time focusing on how they feel and understanding that feeling mechanism within us is sort of it's a guide. It's sort of our navigation. And you had said something earlier when you were setting out to sea that you were teaching people how to use celestial navigation, right? And I'm assuming that, I don't know what that means, but I'm assuming that means something to the extent of, hey, we were looking at the stars and figuring out how to navigate based off of nature.
That's exactly what it is.
So with that in mind, I feel like there's this compass that we have, this navigation system within us. And I love your description of it, because it basically is describing that, hey, we should pay attention to our feelings because they're actually going to tell us the direction to go. And holy cow, what better thing to do than become the captain of our own ship and start to go, hey, that makes me feel bad. I feel bad in this scenario. Maybe I should try to figure out what the better course of action is and the better course of direction is so that I can feel good. And yet I notice and recognize that so many people spend so much time ignoring it and then being upset about where they end up because you ask them, well, did you have an idea that this was going to go poorly? And they say, well, yeah, actually, when it started, I thought, man, I shouldn't do this. And I say, well,
Right.
then you did it anyway. And they're like, yes. And it blows me away how many people really do indeed have that feeling. And then they ignore it and they go, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, well, and they'll justify it, right? They'll say,
Right.
this has the potential to make a whole bunch of money really quick, although it might not be the best thing that like aligns with my values as a human being, right? But I'll do it anyway. It's just not a sustainable thing. It might work in the short term, definitely not in the long term. But
Right.
here's a really good example, about what you just said, and I'll relate it again back to the sailing thing. Is that there's a method, right? So celestial navigation was just looking at the stars and coming up with a point, like fix yourself on the globe somewhere. There is another method for navigation at sea. It's called dead reckoning. And the way that it works is that you know where you are now, and you say the boat is headed in this direction and we're going at this speed. So if I know those two things, I can reasonably predict where we will be in an hour. So I'm going to put where we are on the chart and where we're going to be in an hour on the chart. I'm going to put those 2 points on there. And then in the hour, when the hour is up, I then take another fix. Where is the boat exactly, right? Are we on that future point that I thought, or are we somewhere else? Chances are that we are somewhere else. And it is not because we were steering in the wrong way, right? It's because there are a lot of external factors that push you off course. There are tides that take you sideways, right? The boat itself, even though it's moving in a direction, it's actually kind of moving in a diagonal direction. It's like sliding across the ocean sideways, right? Those are things called set and drift in nautical terms. So the idea is to say, this is where I thought I'd be if there were no external forces. This is where I am because we were pushed sideways. Now, what do I have to do to course correct to get me back to where I eventually want to go? We do that every single hour, right? It's a great exercise, and it's a great idea to project onto life in general, right? No one does those little course corrects. And if they do, right, it's like they judge the feelings that they have for them, like, oh, we're off course. And then they self-judge themselves and they get mad at themselves for being off course, even though it might have been something completely external that was totally out of their control. It'd be like me getting angry at the wind. And so I think if more people did those little course corrections, right, that we'd all not only feel like we were progressing, but progressing in the right direction, which is obviously just as important.
I love that. We teach something called being a better captain of your ship, and so I love it. It's so in line, and you said something that a lot of people get mad because they're off course, and so they get mad at themselves, and there's this huge judgment which also weighs you down and it takes you to the wrong place. But it kind of comes back to this idea of not judging, which in other words would be unconditional appreciation. And there's this beautiful idea of unconditional appreciation that's just so hard to grasp when you first jump into it. It's like, okay, all hell broke loose, everything hit the fan, I can't believe this is happening to me, and then finding a way to appreciate it and go, yeah, this is great. This is amazing. And you're like, everybody around you is looking at you like, what are you talking about? There's nothing great about this. But being able to find that unconditional appreciation and the skill set and the tools to do that, it sounds like you've, through your experiences has kind of really helped build that up. And I can hear it in your language. I can hear it in your stories that it's like, well, I was here and this happened and we made it work and it was great, and you just kind of keep going.
Hey, we're in France now. Like, let's make the best of it and
Yeah.
get some wine and learn how to speak French.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Okay. So, you know, through all of these different experiences, and I'm sure for me, just listening to the little bit that we've talked about so far, I could literally ask you a billion more questions about your story. So we'll have to do this again because I'm sure there are some really cool stories that you've got in there that we haven't touched on. But in efforts to kind of get a little bit behind the scenes of the things that you're doing, I want to know about worry and fear, because a lot of people would never even attempt to consider the things that you've done and to operate in the mode that you operate in. And part of it is worry and fear. We know that these two things are elements that really hold people back and stop them from doing maybe what their heart is telling them to do. So how have you learned to manage and control worry and fear?
Well, do you speak another language other than English?
I don't. I actually can speak Spanish very well if I had something to read, but I might have no vocabulary of my own. So
okay, well, that's okay. Like, but you're getting there. I think that here's. I talked about the whole like Chilean experience. Of course, I learned a lot about myself, about others, about the world being down there. But here is the really, really big takeaway for me. The first 2 months of you being just implanted and immersed into a location where you cannot communicate, you just can't. I mean, you can draw things out, which I carried around a little pad and a pocket dictionary, because this is like, obviously this is 96. So this is like way before anything, Google Translate. And for that first 2 months, it's incredibly difficult. Your learning curve is steep. You are mentally exhausted every single day. But what you find is that the apprehension to actually speak with someone, what sounds like gibberish to you, right, that actually will mean something to someone else, and getting over the embarrassment of looking like an idiot, for lack of a better term, right, and butchering the language and saying something that you don't mean. There is an inherent apprehension in that. I think that that's what stops most people from learning languages. That's why people can say all the time, man, I can understand it so well, but I just can't speak it. I think the reason is because it's not embarrassing to learn for yourself. It really is embarrassing when you go to speak it to somebody else and they're like, what the hell did you just say? So I think that exact same premise goes for anything in life. That's what I learned. I learned to get over the embarrassment of looking like an idiot up front. And once I got over that fear, everything was possible. Everything. I didn't have, of course, I was still worried. I was still prudent in my evaluation of what I was going to pursue. I wasn't reckless, but the idea of looking like a novice and embarrassing myself and not putting content out on Facebook because I was afraid of what people were going to say, or not going and traveling to a place where I didn't speak the language, like in India, right? Not doing that because what am I going to do if I break down? How am I going to communicate? What's going to happen? Like, et cetera. I didn't have any of that fear anymore. And I think that that's a huge, huge reason why I was able to achieve some of this stuff. And I just wish that more people would experience that. They would not really care, like know that you're going to screw it up, but also realize that the process of screwing it up is why people respect you. They will respect you because you're trying, and they're so lenient when it comes to languages, but really with anything, right? They're not going to judge you. They're not going to be like, you said that word wrong, dude. You're dead to me, right? Like, they're not going to say that. But the point is that most people don't ever get to that point. They never realize that over the other side of that embarrassment is something fantastic that you can do with your life. And if more people did that, man, more people would be happier.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. I mean, the number of times my audience knows that I'm a past professional ballroom dancer. And so the number of times you've been in front of an audience and completely blanked out, not had a clue what was going on and had to figure it out. And it does something to you when you're in that public eye and everything doesn't work out, or you have a costume malfunction, or,
Right.
or you just literally you're dancing with your partner and they give you that look of blankness that you can see on another human. And it is the most terrifying thing when it's your partner and they're looking at you like they don't know where they're at. They just, let alone the routine. They're just looking at you blank. And or knowing that you're giving that stare to the other person. Oh my gosh, there's nothing like it.
That's great. And you're in front of lots of people.
Yeah.
Spotlights on you, kind of thing. Yeah, that's crazy, man.
Yeah,
that is crazy.
I think it's interesting how some people learn to walk into that storm and go, no, you know what? It's calm in the middle. It's okay. But you got to make it through the storm a little bit, and get to the middle.
Yep.
So, okay, we're going to go into our lightning round and let's talk about some emotions, because I love talking about emotions. I believe they're at the core and root of the things that we do. We do everything to feel something. And so this is our go-to emotions, whether it be when things are going well or when things are going poorly. And so I'll give you the category and you give us your go-to emotion when things are going well, and then I'll ask you again for when things are going poorly. So in business, you've had lots of businesses along the way and still do. So what's your go-to emotion in business when things are going well?
Ooh, go-to emotion, satisfaction and fulfillment.
Okay.
Really.
And what is your go-to or your limiting emotion when things are going poorly in business?
I to be honest, like a sense of defeat, a sense of maybe hopelessness, in a way that, like, it doesn't matter what I say, like people are just not going to get what I'm trying. Like, I'm obviously doing something wrong here, right? Kind of thing. That kind of hopelessness. Like, what am I doing that is off? It makes so much sense to me. Why doesn't it make sense to anybody else?
Everybody else, right? Okay, partnerships. When things are going well, what's your go-to emotion?
Partnerships when things are going well. We're talking like romantic partnerships?
No,
or like
business.
Business partnerships. Oh, okay. Go-to emotion. The first thing that came to mind was pride, but not necessarily pride like I'm proud of the decision that I made to partner with this person, like that kind of thing. When things are going really well, I'm just a smile from ear to ear because we're just moving, just like my buddy growing up. Like we're just, slowly cranking up the ladder.
Nice. Okay, and when things are going poorly in a partnership,
rage.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Half the time. I mean, like disheartening feelings. Frustration, anger. Hopefully not resentment. If you start to feel that, be aware of it, and then you're like, all right, well, we really need to have a talk. But definitely anger, Yep.
Okay. And coaching, two sides of it. We're going to start with the side where you are the coach and you're coaching other people. So what's your go-to emotion when things are going well, when you're coaching other people?
My go-to emotion is I don't know, what would I feel like? I tend to see the best in people. So what emotion would that be? Like exuberant? No. Exultation? Hope? I feel when things are going well and somebody's doing something that they should be doing, and I can see that, I'm just nothing but joy.
Yeah.
Really.
Nice. And limiting when things aren't going well when you're coaching somebody.
Rage. Again. No, yeah, I like when things aren't going well, mainly it's not necessarily because they're doing the wrong thing. It's usually because they're not doing anything. And that to me is just a waste. Like, it's just frustrating. It's not something that I feel like you can teach. And so I get real frustrated with that. Like, to use the ship analogy again, we used to have a saying on there: you can teach anybody how to sail, but you can't teach people how to be a good person. If they are the best sailor on the planet, but they don't get along with anybody on the ship, we're going to kick them off the next port. So, so when stuff isn't going that my way, or the way of the coachee, right? Because they're not doing anything. They're just paralyzed. They're not doing anything. For me, it's, it's just disappointment, a lot of disappointment. Not anger, I guess, so much. I feel like a parent now. Like, I'm just disappointed. I'm just disappointed in you. Yeah, but yeah, I would say that's a good one. Disappointment.
Okay. And when you're being coached, because clearly you can't get to the place where you're at without having had many mentors and coaches along the way. So what's your go-to emotion when things are going well, when you're being coached?
Like a sense of humility, I think, because I really try to scrutinize who I take advice from. I typically only really take advice from people that have done that very thing on their own and not just, read about it or whatever. And when it just reminds me, when I try something, I do something that's a little bit outside of my comfort zone on their recommendation and it works, I'm humbled. And it's a humbling thing for me, is like, Josh, like, remember, you don't know everything. Like, you're wrong sometimes, and sometimes you have to listen to other people. And I like that a lot. Yeah.
So when things aren't going well, when you're being coached, what's your go-to emotion?
I would say, is dubiousness is that an emotion?
If
Like,
you can say I feel, and then whatever comes after it could be blah, and it's an emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel a sense of doubt, and I have to decide where that's coming from. Am I doubtful that I'm getting wrong advice, or am I doubtful that I just can't do this because it goes against some kind of weird subconscious programming that I have in myself? Something that I have to figure out.
Yeah.
I have to figure that out.
Yeah. Do you have any children?
Nope.
Okay, so we don't have to go into that category. With relationships, this one's about romantic relationships.
Okay.
When things are going well, what's your go-to?
Calm.
Nice.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of calm when things are going well. It's incredible. It's like that feeling that you have after you've been sick for a while and you start to feel better, right? And you feel like 100 times better than you normally would, because you put it in perspective. Like, I feel that.
Nice. And when things are going poorly, what's the limiting?
For me personally, it has always been a sense of entrapment, almost. Like, makes me sometimes want to just run and escape, right? Like, it's what would I say? I feel boxed in, limited. Yeah, I feel handicapped, like, in a way, right? Yeah, when it's not going well, I realize that most of the time relationships are compromised, and sometimes sometimes I don't like to compromise. I think it's better to go fast and alone, right, kind of thing. But I also understand that is not always the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those are the categories. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. And so you made it through. Way to go.
All right. Yes. How'd I do? How'd I do compared to other people? Half those things I don't even think were emotions. They were just, I don't know, weird words that I made up.
I think to some extent, academia has put too many limits on the idea of emotions and feelings. And, it's okay when you go, I don't have any words to describe what this feeling is, but it's kind of like this and it's kind of like that. And there's not really a word for it, but I feel, and it's now an emotion. And that is essentially my thought on it. Like, it doesn't have to be described in words, because sometimes words just don't teach. They don't describe. They only get in the way, and they put labels on things that maybe shouldn't have labels. And so it's interesting, because as I've been privileged to speak with some pretty cool people such as yourself, it's really enlightening to be able to hear what each of you have to say about those emotional states, because what we get from you, and for those that aren't watching and just listening, you can go watch the video, but we can get something from you that allows us to connect and go, oh, I get it. I get what you're saying. I understand that word isn't maybe what you wanted to say, but because I can see you and I can watch and I can take in the other senses, I can feel something about what it is that you're delivering. And that part in itself is ineffable. And it's priceless, really. So it's really cool. So, like I said, we'll have to do this again, because I'm sure we could talk about some of your amazing stories along the way. But certainly, I don't want to finish up today without getting in and letting you tell us a little bit about the software that we've alluded to along the way. You are doing some incredible things with the software, 2 pieces of software that you have. They're incredible. They're really amazing. And honestly, everybody needs to go check them out. But why don't you tell us about them and anything else that you want to fill us in on, so that we can make sure that everybody can find their way to what you're up to.
Okay, sure. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, I have, since the roosters agree. I don't know if you've been hearing all of these roosters in the background. I apologize for that. They're all over Key West. They run around like gangs here. So the software, really both of the softwares, one is called Funnel Mappy, one is called Fire Builders. And both of those pieces of software I created out of my own need. And they now have just organically grown into something that a lot of people rely on a daily basis to get through, because we all have the same problems. So Funnel Mappy is all about visualizing customer journeys and keeping all the strategy and the details in one spot. And then Fire Builders is specifically for coaches, and it allows them to hold all of their people daily accountable, all at the same time and all automatically. So it inspires action, it helps retention, it basically nurtures, it has like gives you this one-on-one nurturing relationship, and really helps people engage in ways that they couldn't before because of time constraints. So both of those, check them out, funnelmappy.com, firebuilders.io.
Those are awesome. You're going to love them. So all of you listening, go out, check out those sites. We'll have the links in the description so you can find it there, and go check out these 2 pieces of software. They will change your world. I am so thankful that you joined us today, Josh, and took the time. I know you're super busy, and I know you're out adventuring in the world. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk with the lifers in the Magic for Life audience, and we sure appreciate you, and I appreciate all that you've done and done for us. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Michael. I'm honored and flattered, and this was so great. So anytime, just get in touch with me, anybody that's listening, and this has been fantastic. I just loved your questions. You're a great host, man. So thank you for having me on.
Thanks a lot. It was my pleasure, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Hey, Lifers, don't forget to get your free copy of the Every Minute book. You can find it at everyminutebook.com.
Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.